Greetings, my name's Andrew Sumner. My grandfather, Pop Smythe, bought me my first comic book in Liverpool, England, when I was 3 years old, and I spent the next 50 years hurtling around the pop culture kaleidoscope, first as a fan, and then as a journalist, editor, publisher and presenter. Along the way, I met a bunch of interesting people who will be joining me here, creators, performers, professionals and public servants. We live in divisive, fractured times, but art and popular culture connect people from all viewpoints and from all walks of life. I'm often struck by the passions people enjoy, that they can set aside their differences for and agree on whatever those passions are, whether I share them or not. And that spark, that moment of instinctive, connective agreement, that's what I call a hard agree.
Here we go. That's it. So we don't have to worry about how we look on camera, although you look great, mate, because this is just going to be the audio. So we don't have to be at our usual, Sinatra and Martin standard of male beauty for this.
It's audio sparkle, not video sparkle.
Audio sparkle, yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah, spot on, mate.
Hard agree.
Yeah, hard agree indeed. Hard agree, my friend. So Max, how are you doing, mate?
I'm doing great. It's very, very cold here, and we already determined we won't even go out for drive-through food today. We're just staying in. It's disconcerting here because there are a lot of people who are just completely throwing the caution to the wind and just pretending that this pandemic is over, and so that's unsettling.
It's highly unsettling, and it's of course just a million miles away from the truth.
Yeah, it has become something political. It's become a symbol. And it's one of the dumbest things I've seen in a lifetime filled with viewing dumb things.
Yeah. Yeah, amen to that. No, I couldn't agree more. And in fact, we could fill this whole hour talking about the COVID situation and the pandemic situation and, how poorly it's been dealt with in the US, how poorly it has been dealt with in the UK. At the time of recording, I would say that we're at the beginning of, in the UK, what appears to be the one thing that our incumbent government seem to be doing relatively well, which is rolling out the vaccine quite quickly. So I already know quite a few people who've had the vaccine. So my parents have had it. My daughter has had it. Dave Gibbons, for example, has had it, co-creator of Watchmen. So it is, and I think I know when I'm going to get it, not for a while now, but I think I know it's all scheduling out.
Well, I haven't had the vaccine yet. And the thing that, and I'm old enough to qualify here and have enough underlying conditions to qualify here.
Yeah, right.
And yet everybody I know who has gotten the vaccine is a Trump voter. And to tell you how frustrating that is to me, knowing how much he cocked it up.
Yeah.
So the very people that were, not wearing hats and or not wearing masks and instead wearing MAGA hats are ahead of me in line, and that that's a sad irony.
And of course, that includes Trump himself, the ultimate COVID denier, and his whole inner circle of morons / dastardly, liars and double dealers. To me, it's quite amazing to see.
Yes, I don't know if you feel I think you've been spared. I know you're not necessarily wild about your prime minister.
Yeah,
but I don't
that's
know
an understatement.
I don't know if you've had the level of a whole segment of the population who refuse to acknowledge the difference between reality and unreality, who think that lies are the truth. No, that is the rampant thing here. People thinking that lies are the truth.
I think that is an almost uniquely American phenomenon, as is the collusion between the congregating not wearing a mask and celebrating your individual freedom. I mean, it's batshit crazy. It makes no fucking sense. In the same way that gun ownership is a uniquely American phenomenon. It's not. If you go anywhere else in the world, it's not even an issue. People don't even talk about it.
Right. Well, I'll tell you something interesting. I hope it's interesting. But when I was in college, summers I worked for a newspaper. And the first summer I worked for this newspaper was, I think it was 1968. So I was I know while I was working for this newspaper, I was in charge of, if you can believe it, it's a small town newspaper, the front page, and choosing everything that came in over the wire. So I was there for everything from Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy's respective assassinations to the moon landing. I mean, it was to Chappaquiddick. It was a wild time and so. But one of the things that would happen, in addition to checking the wire service, I would get mail from various political groups. And I remember very vividly the day I had a letter that was pro-life, in other words, anti-abortion, the sanctity of life, and I read about the sanctity of life. Then in a separate envelope from the same address, I had a pro-capital punishment letter about how these, about how we had to get even with these people that had taken people's lives, and so we're going to take their lives. And I just held one in one hand and one in the other and thought, I mean, just is it logic? Is it hypocrisy? Is it stupidity? Or is it a magnificent cocktail of all three?
Yeah, I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, I think it's very funny, that anecdote, but it's also fascinating. And you've touched upon the one other example that I was going to say, which I think is a uniquely American issue. And when I say uniquely American, I mean when you compare all the developed, essentially democratic Western nations. And I would say America stands alone on this whole kind of lies are the truth thing. And also, which is a relatively recent phenomenon too. I know it's been around for a while, but for it to grab hold in the way it has, I think that's a byproduct of the Trump years, right? And then the other thing is guns, and gun control and the insanity around that. And these are two things you're talking about. The rest of the Western democracies in the world are like, this isn't even a thing anywhere else. What's going on? It doesn't make any sense. And then the third leg of that, of course, is what you've just mentioned, which is abortion, which is taken as read anywhere else in the developed world as being a good thing to be able to offer, young women who are in that situation. It's not even debated. It's just the law. Yeah. It's just the law. It's legal. You can avail yourself of those services if you need them, if you're in an unfortunate situation where you need to. And it's just simply not an issue. It's such a fascinating thing to watch the debate around abortion in the US, where it's such an emotive issue, so conjoined with people's faith and whatnot, which, of course, there is a genuine divide between religion and government everywhere else in the developed world. And there is supposed to be in the US as well, But it's such a fascinating thing to watch, particularly when people can't even use the fucking word abortion. It's all these weird kind of like pro-choice, or are you pro-life? It's like, what? Why not? People can't. It's like Voldemort's name. People can't even say abortion. So weird. Everywhere else, it's just like, no. So those, I would say, and me, and I say that the preface to this is, as is I love America. I'm related to many Americans. My grandfather fought with an American unit. I've grown up completely obsessed with American culture. And in the normal course of my life, I spend half of my year in the USA. I fucking love the USA, right? This isn't an anti-American rant by any means. I actually love the USA. But these three things are absolutely unique among the developed Western democracies of the world. And you don't get them anywhere else. It's fascinating, I think.
Well, am I right or wrong? But it has been a while since in the UK, Ruth Ellis was hanged.
Yes, quite some time.
It has been
quite
a while.
Some time, my friend. Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah.
I know. I have to say that I have never been more ashamed of my country than I have been just since the Capitol riot.
Oh, wow. Amazing. Yeah.
But I will tell you the saddest thing about that riot, and then we can get off politics, because it's always kind of I try to stay away from, I never discuss that on my blog. I know. Or if I do, it's a glancing blow, shall we say.
Yeah.
But I was working on the New Quarry book.
Yeah.
New Quarry novel, which is violent and politically incorrect in every possible way. I'm sure there's a horde of liberals out there that would like to see me strung up if they only believed in capital punishment. And so I'm working on this this book, and I know it's January 6th, and I know that that's going to be a key date because of the, because that's the day that the electors are going to be sanctioned, officially approved.
Yeah.
And I knew that there was going to be a big rally that Trump had whipped up. I go downstairs at about 2:00 and turn on the TV. I've been working all day, ignoring it. Because if I turned it on, I knew that's all I'd watch. And so I see these morons crawling over the face of the Capitol, basically like ants.
Yeah.
And here's the sad thing. I just shrugged. I was just like, yeah, that's about right. Instead of being outraged, instead of being, starting to cry, instead of starting to shout, instead of having some emotional reaction, any kind of surprise, I was just like, yeah, that's the next step. Rush the Capitol. Now then, of course, I had all those emotions come through when you actually see the footage of them inside. It was a long shot. You know the difference in a movie between a close-up and a long shot emotionally is, can be quite different. Just seeing them crawling up and rushing and hitting with the American flag. How do you like that one?
Yeah, right.
I mean, It's just, and the thing about the Trump era in general is, if I had, you're one of my editors.
Yeah.
And I came to you, and none of this had happened. And this was the book I pitched to you.
Yeah.
Would you throw me out of the room?
Yeah, right.
You would.
Yeah, but just,
there's only so much people will believe.
This is not believable. This is America.
Yeah.
This is America.
And it makes me very sad. I actually think we've gone around I lived through the Vietnam War era.
Yeah.
And I thought that was our low ebb.
Yeah.
My father didn't talk to me for like 2 years.
Wow.
And, and it was, and this is worse. This is absolutely worse. This is probably as close to the way we were right before the Civil War.
Yeah.
Which is something that always seemed very distant to me until lately.
Yeah, because you have this rabid, deluded base of people who've been consistently lied to for a very long period of time by essentially, dastardly self-serving media barons. And what they believe is just as no grounding in reality.
Well, I think the only reason we haven't had a civil war here, and we've obviously had armed insurrection because we had that on January 6th. The difference between now and the middle of the 19th century is that the South was one unified area where all the people that thought that way were there, and everybody who thought the other way were in another regional part of the country. Well, now we're a shuffled deck. We're everywhere. I mean, I have people living on my street that have those beliefs that are so 100% at odds with mine. So it's harder for us to have, it's harder to have a civil war.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, to the degree we had a civil war on January 6th, people had to go to Washington from all over the country. And they did come from all over the country. Not a huge number, but enough to tell you that, this is like the way, fat marbles a steak.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just all through there.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good analogy. I think it's a very good analogy, and it's dealing with that and getting to the other side of it is just such a huge obstacle, and it's such a huge thing to need to do, and it's I mean, I know that all my US friends, of which there are many, which I have many, as you know, are almost unanimously concerned about these issues, quite rightly so. Yeah, so it's I really feel for you, man.
Well, I also have this interesting aspect of my career, and you're part of this. You're part of this, which is that Mickey Spillane chose me to continue Mike Hammer.
Yeah,
Mike Hammer is, I think, somewhat wrongly, but is widely considered to be a right-wing, even fascist character. And so this is one of the reasons why, quite frankly, I don't talk about this stuff in public much. And I don't do almost nothing about it on my weekly blog. That's every Tuesday. I do a new blog because they're my customers.
Yes, of course.
And that's what Mickey used to call his readers, his customers. So there's probably a good number of Trump voters that read my camera.
Yeah.
And God bless them for doing it. And to me, I mean, we could talk about the fact that I view my camera as a character, so his beliefs are not necessarily my beliefs. I'm just trying to be faithful to him as a literary beast, and he can be a beast. But there's another aspect of this that I reflect on sometimes, which is as I do what little I go out in the public now, where I go through a drive up and get McDonald's or Burger King or whatever, or somebody brings something to the door, and I have that little bit of interaction with people. I know damn well that some of them are Trump voters, but I don't treat them disrespectfully, and they don't treat me disrespectfully, and we're friendly. And when we say, stay safe, we mean it. And so it's almost like there's the humanity box over here, and then this crazy political box over here. And it's sad. It's
yes.
just, it is possibly tragic. That I lost some of my best friends over this.
Yeah.
Lost one of the best men, one of the groomsmen at my wedding, somebody I love dearly, and he believes in this stuff.
Yeah,
I have a nephew who bought into QAnon.
Well, and that's fucking nuts. How can you even rationalize any of that stuff?
Well, I have seen lizards who pretended to be humans.
So did I. Wasn't that called V though? That TV show. That's
you mentioned reality TV, and we'll get off of this. But one of the things about reality TV is, I have a very good friend named Phil Dingledine, who is my editor and cinematographer on the indie movies and documentaries that I've done. I've done over the years. And now I forgot what point I was going to make. What were we talking about?
Sorry, mate. I totally distracted you. I tell you what it was. I had to put my HDMI cable in because I realized my Wi-Fi signal wasn't robust enough. Yeah. Okay. Basically, we're talking about QAnon.
Okay. We're talking about QAnon. It'll come back to me. I'll come back to it.
Yeah, no worries. I'll
be editing it to some degree.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I'll launch in with another question. So as you've just alluded to, actually, Max, you and I are friends, and we also have a working relationship. And I'm privileged to be your editor on the Mickey Spillane's My Hammer books, which are published by Titan Books, and when I say I'm privileged to be your editor, I'm here to tell anybody who's listening that being Max Allan Collins' editor doesn't really involve a lot of work, because generally speaking, Max.
You broken a sweat yet?
What's that? Yeah, no. Just a sweat of pure enjoyment, mate. Do you know what I mean? You produce highly complete manuscripts, and really, I guess, the editing process, certainly on Hammer, my experience with you, is essentially, just me going through your manuscript, reading it, enjoying it, giving the odd note about, have you thought about this? That's as much as. It's not an editor in the sense of some of my experiences over the years where you've got to go into the DNA of every page and go, hey man, look, this sentence construction is just not working. I don't understand what you're trying to say. That's not what editing Max Allan Collins is like.
Well, and this too. I run into sometimes because editors, line editors and copy editors are used to having to do a lot of work.
Yeah.
Mine comes in and they feel like, well, we better do a lot of work on this, even though it doesn't need it.
Yeah.
And then I can get into some real jams on that when I have a copy editor who thinks he or she ought to rewrite the entire book.
Yeah.
And it's probably my pet peeve in the writing business. And I've allowed myself to get more upset about it than I should.
Yeah, but I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think part of the editor's role personally is that you have to go into the process respecting what the writer themselves wants to achieve from that process, particularly if they've got a whole lineage of successful novels that they've written and had published. And, in your case, you're highly prolific, you're an award-winning author. I think I know exactly what you're talking about because I've seen it, and I've heard you tell me stories of experiences that you've had, where, and I know other writer friends of mine have had similar experiences where you work with X, Y, Z editor, and they've got the whole self-justification thing of I need to do a lot of work on this. Now, some writers, I'm sure, and I think there are some fairly big names who need fairly robust editing. But again, that's part of the conversation and part of the relationship. I think if you're dealing with somebody who's had a great deal of success and is very prolific, like yourself, point one is you have to be led by what you want to get out of the editing experience as you open the door, and if it's like, no, I want a light edit. I do not want a structural edit. I don't want to get into the DNA of each sentence. Yeah. If I've missed something or if I've been repetitious, that's what you have an editor, and you've essentially got two editors, haven't you? Because whoever you're working with at whatever publishing house, whether it's me at Titan or Charles Ardell at Hardcase, but you've also got Barb, your wife as well, your wife and partner, who is really your first editor, right? Before I ever see the manuscript.
She is. That's absolutely right. It's not that writers, everybody needs editing. Everybody needs help. I mean, even if it's just like, I don't understand this. Barb will say that. There'll be a paragraph and she'll say, I just don't understand this. And then I read it and I explain it to her, and she says, "Fine, but you can't go door to door explaining to people what you had in mind." And so that kind of clarity is necessary. There's some terrific, talented people though, who need more editing. I mean, Stephen King is one of the great storytellers of our time, of any time, but he's not allowed himself apparently to be edited much in recent years. He is the first thing he did with The Stand was put another 30,000 words into it.
Oh yeah.
We needed another 30,000 words of The Stand. So you can get too powerful. We just watched, I like Quentin Tarantino, how much I love Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
As do I. And that's something we'll talk about again, actually.
I love that. But Barb and I revisited some of his stuff, and she had never seen some of it. So we watched Death Proof the other night. That's part of Grindhouse, and it is wonderful, but incredibly self-indulgent.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's the epitome of self-indulgence.
Dialogue just going on your conversations going on forever, just so he can hear himself talk. Yeah, and nobody stood up to him. Yeah. Nobody stood up to him, and so he has a movie that should be like an A+ movie of its kind, and it's about a B-, which is crazy to. Yeah. So somebody, if I come in and I'm just being arrogant, somebody has to stand up to me. Yeah. So you're not doing yourself any favors doing this, and that's happened to me before, and they've been right. Yeah. Because if we weren't self-indulgent, we wouldn't be creative people.
Right, of course. Yeah, it's a very good point. I think I personally, I think the thing about you there, Max, is you tend not to write too long. Yeah, for want of a better description, that's a rather ham-fisted way of putting it, perhaps. But I don't think you overwrite by any means, and your style is quite lean, and certainly you've name-checked somebody I think is a magnificent writer, Stephen King, but I generally don't read that many Stephen King novels these days because I find them to be terribly overwritten, and just I don't personally like reading books. One of my prejudices, I don't really like reading books that are more than about 250 pages long, and I almost never read books that are longer than 300 pages. Now, clearly, I've got an English degree. I've read a ton of books that are way longer than that, but my preference is not to read books that are overwritten. And I still have tremendous fondness for King's earlier, shorter works. Yeah, the ones that he's written later at tremendous length aren't my favorites, even though some of them are brilliant. And another person, I think a great example for somebody I believe massively overwrites, who I wouldn't really read this series of books anyway, because it's not really within my wheelhouse, but I know many people who love this author. That's J.K. Rowling, right? Now, J.K. Rowling, I could have perhaps read all of the Harry Potter books if they'd stayed the same length as the first two, which were around, as I recall, 250, 300 pages. But from the point where it really blew out, I think from the third or fourth novel in the series, they almost like quadruple in length. And at that point, I'm like, I'm just not down for reading this many pages about what is a relatively simple premise. You know, I don't need to read it in this level of detail.
You raise an interesting point, which is frankly, personal preference. People, I think, sometimes don't think through that books are quite different from movies. If you and I go to see a movie, we are going to see the same movie. Now, we may interpret it somewhat differently. We may like it or not like it because of the mood we were in that day or because just who we are. I mean, I find sometimes that I dislike a movie that I liked when I first saw it, and vice versa. Sometimes I like what was wrong with me. This is terrific, and it can be as simple as what your mood was when you saw it, but your age when you saw it is a factor. However, with a novel, any work of fiction, you have to bring a lot more as to the party as the consumer. The reader has to be essentially a collaborator. So, I often feel like, well, sometimes I get to play, I get to play Broadway, and sometimes I'm playing the 3 Mile Island Dinner Theater, because where it plays, the brain it plays in, and what they bring to it is going to be a major factor. So it's like you and I can't read the same book and have the same experience. Anything close to the same experience. Now, as a writer, I tend to be even though I think I am pretty lean, I tend to be very controlling, so that I can have you, so that your experience and the next guy's experience and the next gal's experience will be similar enough that they all have had a similar experience. Okay. And that's one of the reasons why one of the things I am most criticized about, Andrew, is that I overdescribe setting and clothing.
Oh,
and
really?
I get that.
I find that fascinating.
I get that all the time, and particularly with this current generation, everything is moving so fast. But for me as an author, setting and clothing descriptions are key to characterization. The room you live in, the house you live in, tells us a lot about who you are, and it does it in a way that is not, it's not ham-handed, is not overdone. It's just like, this is who lives here, and the clothing you wear tells you something about that person. And it bewilders me when people complain about, I'm thinking, well, if you don't like it, skip it. If you come to, I'm describing a room and you're bored, move on to the next hunk of dialogue. But yeah. I don't like to have characters running around naked in a book unless it's a sex novel, I guess.
No, I guess maybe my favorite novels for so many years have been written by authors who tend to be very descriptive about those points that I don't even bat an eyelid. And I think also you need the light and shadow between. Constant dialogue I find pretty boring. I think but your dialogue can be very propulsive and really move, scenes along. But if it's fucking everything you're reading in a chapter, you want some light and shadow. You need some, we need dialogue to propel the narrative, and you need to have some sense of space and who the people are and what they're wearing, which of course is a big part of who a character is how they're dressed and the kind of situation that they're in. So I find those things very important. I don't think you can have, one without the other. I think go too far. I mean, I am aware of some authors who I don't think feature enough dialogue in their work, and sometimes dialogue is like described, almost within the narrative of the paragraph. I don't enjoy that particularly either, and I'm a big fan of. I'm really quite a fan. I guess it's because I've read so many PI novels over the year. I'm a big fan of the first person perspective. Yeah. I don't think you need to have it to write a great book, but when I look back, all of my favorite books are in fact written in the first person. And that starts with being a huge actually, this is not even in the PI space, although I read a lot of Chandler when I was quite young, and it's left a massive imprint on me, as it would, as I know it had to with yourself. But my other, I guess, the first writer that I really fell in love with and couldn't get enough of their work was Damon Runyon.
Oh, Damon Runyon, the short stories.
My dad, Ken, is a big Damon Runyon fan, and he kind of passed that on to me. And we just ended up. He gave me all the books when I was in my early teens, I guess. I guess by the time I'd been a student, I think I'd cycled through the whole lot maybe 4 or 5 times.
Well, the first person that Damon Runyon uses is actually the Watson first person.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Not the main character.
No, that's right. It's so fascinating. Yeah.
And Great Gatsby. But you're still getting it filtered through that first person style. And I love Runyon. He's my favorite short story writer. And then, of course, there's Mark Twain with Huckleberry Finn, which is now politically incorrect, of course.
Of course, yeah.
But I think Twain is going to outlive the people calling him politically incorrect. Just maybe Mark Twain will outlive them. But it's I'll give you a small example of what we're talking about. I'm working on a fun series. It's just basically fun, and that's this new series I'm doing for Wolfpack, which is about the secret agent who James Bond was based on. That's the conceit. Yeah. His name is John Sand, and Ian Fleming based everything on my fictional spy. So I could just do a James Bond novel basically. And so I'm working with my friend Matt Clemens, who did all the CSI novels with me, and did the 3 political novels I did, Supreme Justice, the Reader and Rogers series. So this is for fun, all right. So these are venture. I mean, they're absolutely. This is absolutely McDonald's, not a steakhouse, all right.
Yeah.
And so we're having the conversation about, is there enough action in here? Is there? And so as we're plotting the next one, I'm like saying, okay, there has to. When we have a big action scene, then the next chapter, no action. But then the next chapter, we got to have an action scene, right? So that you can have, you need that break, even in something kind of simplistic, which these books are fairly simplistic. But my wife, when she was reading the second one, and in the second book, which hasn't come out yet, which is called Live Fast, Spy Hard. Okay.
Yeah, fantastic title. I love it.
And she's reading it chapter at a time. And she said to me, because it's almost a 60,000 word chase, this book. There's all kinds of action going on. And she said to me, very diplomatically, is it possible that you could have too much action in a book? I said, probably is. I'll look at that. Maybe we'll knock it back a little. Because we had, we had like a gunfight on the beach, and in the same chapter we had a gunfight during an earthquake. So maybe we stepped over the line just a little bit. But of course, these books are to some degree obviously tongue in cheek. They're not satires.
No,
they're not satires. But look at Fleming. Look, I think James Bond has done pretty well.
Yeah, right on.
He spent an awful lot of time telling you what brands of things that he used.
He was brand obsessed.
Cigarettes he smoked, what cars he drove, and what clothes he bought, and that. So, did we not need that?
Yeah. No.
Do we not need to know that he's in a tuxedo?
Yeah.
I mean, come on. That's who he is. Do we not need to know Mike Hammer's in a trench coat?
Yeah.
And a fedora? Do we not need to know it's raining? That's one of the things that Elmer Leonard was great, but his like 10 rules for writing are total bullshit.
Yeah.
And the first one is never write about weather. Yeah. Really write about weather.
The thing is, everybody's got
raining in a film, in a noir story.
Yeah.
At times. I mean, it's just. But this is what writers do. Writers they learn how to write their books, what they do, because it's a totally self-taught art. You can go. Yeah, I went to University of Iowa Writers Workshop, which was the best one in the country, and I still taught it myself everything. I got some tips and I got some support, but I taught myself, how to do this. But what I learned to do was how to write a Max Allan Collins book. I didn't learn how to write an Andrew Sumner book. I didn't learn how to write an Elmore Leonard book. So if I start to teach you how to write, all you're going to learn is how to write one of my books. And there's already one of me.
Yeah.
Just like there already was an Elmore Leonard. So when Elmore Leonard went out there telling everybody they ought to write like Elmore Leonard, that's one of the dumbest things I ever heard a smart person do.
I agree with you. And I think this is, to flip over to movies, this is, I think, the issue with somebody like, say, Robert McKee. He's clearly a, very analytical, clever guy. But, putting aside some of the obvious flaws about his work with regard to editing and whatnot, I'm going back to talk about Tarantino. It's quite clear that Tarantino absolutely doesn't give a fuck about any of the structure that Robert McKee espouses whatsoever. And of course, what has that led to? It's led to Tarantino being the most influential filmmaker of his generation, and his work always being, warts and all, something you really look forward to. And not only that, he's delivered 4 or 5 truly great, groundbreaking pieces of work. You really can't fault Reservoir Dogs. You can't fault Pulp Fiction. You can't fault, in my opinion, Jackie Brown. You can't fault Once Upon a amazing film. You can't fault Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I'm also very fond of the Hateful Eight. I think that's a great film, even though it is very long. I think that's all part and parcel of what it is.
And the Bastards.
Inglorious Bastards. Yeah.
I mean, I had trouble with him at first. I had trouble with him at first, and it was interesting when my wife Barb and I watched Kill Bill. She had never seen them, and I hadn't liked either one of them at the time.
Yeah,
and I watched them now and thought, these are terrific.
Yeah,
I love them. But I know what happened to me was when I first went to see him, because I am a film buff and I'm a TV buff. And that included Asian movies. That Road to Perdition obviously is a nod to, Lone Wolf and Cub and John Woo and all that stuff that my son Nate and I were watching on gray market VHS, because none of that stuff was out yet. I just have friends who said, you got to watch this. And so I saw all of John Woo before any of it had been released in the United States. And when I would watch him, I'd know where he was getting everything.
Yeah. And
it was annoying the hell out of me because I felt that, like all the music he was using, all the music cues he was using, I knew what the music cues were.
Yeah, because you recognize the music from Ironside. Yeah, that's exactly right.
This is from Death Rides a Horse.
Right.
And I was just sitting there being pissed off. And I think probably on some level I was jealous that I hadn't gotten to stealing from these people before. Okay. But what I have come to realize is that stuff is in there, not because he's picking the bones of other filmmakers, but because he loves this stuff.
Yeah.
And when he uses it, he does it in a way that doesn't resemble anybody else's movies.
Yeah.
And that's what I understand now. That he used what he needed to use, but there's much more originality in his work than there is borrowing.
Yeah.
And come on, we all borrow. Shakespeare didn't think up any of those stories.
Yeah, no, it's so true. I find it very interesting that you referenced Kill Bill, because I had a similar but dissimilar experience. And of course, after Reservoir Dogs, blew everything apart, and after Pulp Fiction doubled down, and then Jackie Brown trebled down on things, I was by that point a huge rabid Tarantino fan, as was every other movie journalist working in the UK at the time that I knew.
Let me interrupt just for a second, and that's just to say, since I dissed Elmore Leonard, it's not an accident that it was an Elmore Leonard book. The structure, the whole
Rum
shape
punch.
of it, that took Quentin Tarantino up a notch.
Yes,
because I think it's above the other two.
Oh no, I think it's a masterpiece, and I'd like to return to that in a second because I love that movie, and I particularly love the two lead performances. I think they're incredible, amazing. Let's talk about that in a sec because Kill Bill. Just to go through my experience with Kill Bill, so I was a huge fan, and at that point, I was at the time that Kill Bill came out, I was the publisher of Uncut magazine, which is a magazine that still runs to this day, and it's essentially classic rock and roll, classic Americana music and movies. Yeah, very, very, very. It's a British publication, but in addition to being about the classic sort of British invasion acts and the classic British music acts of the 70s, and so it's got a very, very American focus. And we did lots of long form journalism on Bob Dylan, on the band, etc., dropping in Janis Joplin, whatever, but a lot on film and a lot on, say, the classic film of the 50s, 60s, and 70s, whether that's Sam Fuller or whether it's Scorsese and his ilk, right? De Palma, all that kind of stuff. So I go and see the preview of Kill Bill, and I'm there with two old friends, colleagues of mine, a guy called Michael Bonner, who is the film editor of Uncut magazine. I was the publisher at the time, but I used to still write for the magazine. And then the other guy's a guy called Duncan Baisley, who's the managing editor of Loaded, another magazine that I published. And at that time, I was writing a bit for Uncut, and I was writing a bit for the NME. And the NME is the New Musical Express. It's like the Rolling Stone of the UK. So we all go to see it along with every other kind of movie journalist and music/movie journalist. And we're at a screening with there's maybe 200 of us. So Kill Bill 1 rolls and everyone goes fucking bananas. Everybody loves it, right? You could just tell it's got its grip on the whole audience. Everybody's having a brilliant time. And then that sequence at the end of the movie where the last beat is where you hear Bill and Buck, I think his brother is called, the Michael Madsen character, where you hear them talk about the fact that her daughter is in fact still alive, which she doesn't know at this point. And that's the last moment in the movie, right? And there's an audible kind of gasp, yeah. And I've never been to see any film that interrupted the narrative in the same way that, say The Empire Strikes Back did, and ends essentially on a cliffhanger. I've never been in any screening where the movie ended on a cliffhanger and you had a room of not regular punters at the cinema, but battle-hardened, cynical journalists, who have had their beer and their sandwiches and don't have to say anything nice about the movie.
And what haven't we seen, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, what the fuck, who cares? That all-pervasive cynicism, which I know you don't have, and I know that I don't have, but I've spent a lot of time around some of my fellow journalists who have exactly that. Often, the more prestigious the organ that they write for, the more impaired their actual love of cinema seems to be, right? And there's a whole conversation I can have about this where I generally prefer the movie and music journalism of the people who write for the monthly magazines devoted to those forms than the people who write for, say, the prestigious newspapers, who I think are completely out of touch with what people actually love about cinema personally. But to flip back to Kill Bill, so it has that ending, and if everybody could have stood up and said, roll the second part right now, they would have done. If they could have somehow got their hands on part 2 in that moment, they would have fucking rioted. It was all anybody could talk about, and it was one of those evenings where we all went to the pub afterwards and we're there till closing time, and everyone is just dissecting the movie, complete euphoria. And the interesting thing was, a year later, when I then went to review part 2, and I remember I went along and I saw it with my brother, and I walked out of part 2 with a profound sense at that time of utter disappointment. I was like, oh man, that just didn't give me what I thought I was coming in to see, because it's very, very dialogue based, which is something I love about Tarantino. But there are action sequences in it, but I just felt like almost like part 1. This is what I felt at the time, was like kind of perfectly conceived in terms of its doubling down action beats. Right. And there's these huge, very lengthy pieces of discourse in part 2. Which on their own merit are kind of brilliant, like the whole Bill talking about Superman thing. But I was profoundly disappointed and felt that way for a long time in retrospect. So whereas my part 1 review was like a 5-star rave, the part 2 review was like a 3-star. Well, it's it's great in parts, but the interesting thing is I then didn't see either part for about 5 or 6 years, and then watched them with my son one day, back to back, one Saturday at home. And then when I watched it the second time around, both he and I thought part 2 was fucking brilliant. I really, really enjoyed it. It's like, and I think Tarantino is one of those guys that his work is so rich, actually. You can go back and revisit and find all these things in it that you didn't see the first time. As much as you might go to the cinema and be a seasoned movie viewer and therefore used to the tricks of cinema and the fact that it can have that emotional effect upon you, I think with him, even though you might be just as sophisticated in terms of your movie knowledge, although probably not, as Tarantino, you can watch his movies a second time and get yards and yards of stuff out of them you didn't see the first time around.
Right. Can you pause for a second?
Of course I can, brother. Yeah.
All right, I'll be right back.
Okay. I took the opportunity of that commercial break to make a cup of tea.
All right.
Yeah. How you doing, pal? You all right?
I'm doing fine. We can pick right back up where we were.
Yeah, right. So basically...
are we recording again?
No, we're recording again now. Yeah, I just let it roll, actually. I'll just edit that bit out. So that was my experience. That was my experience with Kill Bill. It was part 2 for me was almost a completely different experience when I came back to watch it a second time.
Well, we watched it. Barbara and I watched it one night and one the next night, and that worked perfectly well. But he did reassemble it, and it was shown a few times as, I think it was called something like Kill Bill, the whole bloody thing, or something. Yeah,
that's it's the whole bloody affair where it's all cut together in one go. I would love to see that. There's also a Japanese version where all of the action sequences in color. There's that whole black and white sequence. Where you do see a close up of somebody's eye, they blink, and it goes black and white for about 10-15 minutes.
Right.
In the Japanese cut, that's all in color.
Well, I think he must have decided that he didn't like it that way, or because you would think he would have brought it back out.
Yeah.
And I know there's a couple of versions of Hateful Eight.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah, I actually that. Did you ever see that? I
did. I saw it in the high definition.
Me too. That was the longer version the first time. Yeah, because there's 3 different versions. There's the main release version. There's the kind of roadshow version, which in the Panavision Super whatever, that is longer and has more of these extensive shots of that beautiful countryside that he shot in. I too went to see that, and it came with a program and all that kind of stuff. Myself and my son went, and then there's the version which is on Netflix, which is the 4-part version. Which is, if you haven't seen that, I would recommend it. I really enjoyed it. So if you watch,
that's more footage,
yeah, and it's the whole thing cut together into basically 4 hour-long or thereabouts episodes, and there's definitely more stuff in it. But it actually works. It works as this kind of 4-episode thing. It's definitely on Netflix USA.
Well, one thing that I'm really find very amusing, and you'll understand why, but you probably know that he has announced that he signed to write a novelization of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and is apparently working on it right now. It comes out later, I think later this year, which fascinates me because it just shows his perverse love for movies and everything to do with movies, because he's doing a novelization of a movie that won't be out, that will have been out for 2 years or something by the time but that's not what novelizations were for.
No.
He's having it be packaged, I understand, to look like it had come out in, the 70s.
Oh, brilliant.
And I just think it's hilarious. And of course, that I have written many novelizations. That was that was for about 15 years, sort of my side gig to and I don't know if you know why I got into novelizations, but
I would love to hear though, Max.
Well, I will just say briefly that because it's a separate story, but I did do the Dick Tracy novelization for the Warren Beatty film. That was the first one I did, and I lobbied to get it because at the time I was the writer of the Dick Tracy comic strip. Well, about 3 years later, and that book sold about 800,000 copies. That's to date my best-selling book is that Dick Tracy novelization. And about 3 years later, this editor I didn't get along with, speaking of editorial disputes, got me fired from Dick Tracy after 15 years, and after I revitalized the strip.
Yeah, of course you did. Yeah,
they kicked me to the curb, and I am still bitter. I am still very
of course,
bitter.
Max, can I ask, had that editor always been your editor since you'd worked on Dick Tracy?
Oh no, and that's partly why the guy who hired me, he was replaced maybe a year, 2 years before the Tracy movie. So from 1977 to 1988, I had the guy who hired me. Then this guy came in and, in my opinion, had this attitude about, well, I'm not going to like anything the other guy did. So I was on the shit list from day one, and I did what I could to please him, and nothing I did pleased him. And there also, I think there was an agenda to get rid of me just because they ended up hiring somebody who was on staff who already had a salary and just added the Tracy script onto that guy's workload. Whereas I had a contract. And,
yeah, of course.
So I did it for 15 years. Ultimately, it was really a good thing that I got fired, because then I did Road to Perdition and all kinds of good stuff.
Right on. Yeah.
Because I was just trying to stay alive. But one of the first things I did after getting fired was I told my agent, hey, I had one of the best-selling movie novels of all time. Go out and tell people that I'm available to write movie novelizations. And nothing happened for a while. And then I got a call that my agent said, I think you may know this story. My agent said, I've got good news and bad news. The good news is they want you to write the novelization of the new Clint Eastwood movie. And Clint Eastwood had just won for the what's the wonderful
Unforgiven.
movie? Unforgiven.
And he just won for Unforgiven.
He just won, and so I said, well, great. And he said, well, now what's the bad news? He said they need it in 10 days. And I said, well, in 7 days I'm going to San Diego Comic-Con. And he said, well, maybe you should cancel that. And I said, I can't, so I wrote it in 7 days.
Wow.
And I burrowed in, and of course there's no real internet at that point for me to draw on. So Barb helped me. She, because that's a story that goes all around the country. In the Line of Fire is what it was.
Oh yeah, right on. Yeah,
and,
sure.
And the story has, maybe 15 cities in it. So she's on the phone calling anybody we knew in, St. Louis, or anybody we knew, and asking questions and going to the library and getting anything she could. But I delivered it, and it did real well. And then after that, I got movie novel gigs. Sometimes, unfortunately, it was like, call Collins, he can do them fast.
Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah.
But I did. I was probably, I don't think it's immodest to say I was probably the top novelization writer. I would exclude science fiction, because I did not do anything like Star Wars, or I would have loved to, but I did. And in that period, there still was there were a lot of movie novelizations being done for straight pictures, so I did things like American Gangster, and I did Maverick, and I did all kinds of stuff that in different genres, which was fun for me, because I liked being able to operate outside of my comfort zone, because I learned things.
Well, Maverick, of course, you some time ago very kindly gave me a copy of your Maverick novelization, because we found that one of the many things that we have in common is, unlike a lot of English people of my generation, I'm actually a big Maverick fan. It's not that well known to people who are kind of any younger than me, for obvious reasons. I mean, I know that holds true for the US as well, but But yeah, now it does. But I actually grew up watching Brett Maverick. I spent my entire almost high school years watching the Rockford Files on Monday nights. They would screen it on BBC One, and then when Rockford Files finished, the BBC just flipped straight to screening Brett Maverick. And my brother and I particularly used to love that show. But one of the great things about your novelization, of course, is that it actually has a ton of Brett Maverick lore in it that is not in the movie, which I thought was fantastic.
Yes, there's stuff about his brother Bart, and there's references to episodes of the original Warner Brothers show. That's what I grew up with. I'll tell you a story that sounds like it doesn't have anything to do with anything, but it does. It's the story of why I quit the Boy Scouts. Oh,
I want to hear this. Yeah,
okay.
I love it.
So I never was an outdoorsman. I mean, I always said that the first thing that Americans did when they moved west was build a cabin and get the hell inside. Right?
Yeah.
When they got there, they got inside, and so I'm an interior kind of person. But I got pressured into joining the Boy Scouts, and so there was and there's a longer version, which I won't tell you, but the guy who was in charge of the Boy Scouts had been in World War I and was still living it.
Yeah.
And it was very paramilitary, extremely paramilitary. Right. And so we went out for 3 days, and we're doing all of the stuff that you do. This tree is this, and we're gonna have eggs made from powdered eggs, and it was just the most horrible experience. and a friend of mine comes to me, and I'm on the edge of a bluff. There's a little farmhouse down there, and there's an antenna, and you can see into the living room. And my friend comes up to me, and I say, I'm quitting. And he said, well, why are you quitting? I mean, come on, give it a chance. I said. And I pointed down the hill and I said, they're watching Maverick down there. And I don't have to tell you, at that time, there were no VCRs.
Yeah, right on.
Nothing. I was up here eating powdered eggs, and they were down there watching my favorite television show. And I learned a very basic lesson about making the right choices in life.
Oh, mate, I that resonates with me so hard. That is the hardest of hard degrees for me, and I'll tell you why. Because I've had my family has quite a musical bent, right? And everybody's reasonably adept at playing instruments and whatnot. My dad his career was as bank manager, but he's always into the drums, and he used to play the drums in various big bands, right? He was massively into sports, which I never was, and pretty much when he got a bit too old to play the bone-crunching sports he was best at, because he was a very good rugby player. He was such a good rugby player that he ended up being like Bruce Wayne in The Dark Knight Rises. He's got no cartilage in either of his knees. To me, his knees are absolutely wrecked. And so, and they're both, in fact, not his original knees now, so they work a lot better. So he, around about the time that he really couldn't harm his life by playing rugby anymore, which is a very violent sport, he kind of transitioned into embracing more of the musical side of himself. And he ended up playing the trombone. At this point in my life, which is the transition between primary school and being at high school, I kind of played the cornet. But after lobbying to play the cornet, after about a year, I was like, no, fuck this noise. I don't want to play the cornet. I don't actually want to play an instrument. I did used to like singing a lot, right? And I've got a reasonably good singing voice. Not a great one, but a reasonably good one. But I didn't want to sing. I didn't want to sing in a choir. I just didn't want to play an instrument anymore. Unfortunately, my playing the cornet and my dad picking up playing the trombone, it had inspired him to found the local brass band in the part of the Liverpool suburbs where we lived. And he got massively into that. And I had no choice other than to play in the brass band. My sister was in it, and she is genuinely a good player. She met her husband playing in that band, and he can also play really well. I, on the other hand, it was like Wednesday night band practice was for me a 2-hour out of body experience where I'll be there for 2 hours thinking about fucking anything else apart from playing in the brass band. But it quickly got a whole ton worse when the BBC throughout my childhood constantly on a loop endlessly repeated a couple of key things. One was Sergeant Bilko. So Sergeant Bilko, right, is much among Englishmen my age, is everybody knows it, right? English women and men my age, everybody knows it. And the reason for that is from the moment it first aired in the UK until the early 2000s, Bilko was constantly repeated on the BBC, and they would play it just before what used to be the close down of broadcast twice a week. So, you know, they would play Bilko at like 11:30 midnight on a Tuesday and on a Thursday, all throughout my childhood, all throughout my high school years. And of course, you know, once you're a nocturnal kid or you're coming back from the pub when you're a young man, you watch it. So everybody knew it. Everybody knew it and loved it, right? The other thing that was constantly repeated, or two other things, were Alias Smith and Jones, if you ever remember that, which is much more popular in the UK than it ever was in the US. Right. It was like a massive hit in the UK, and it was repeated for years, right? With both Hannibal Hayeses. And then the other thing, of course, was Star Trek on a constant loop. And so I was having this out-of-body experience, going to the brass band, internally hating it and feeling cut off from everything, while knowing that my dad would be disappointed if I didn't go and not wanting to let him down because I love my father, you know. So I'd sit through the pain. But within about 6 months of that band practice being set up every Wednesday night, they started to repeat Star Trek right in the middle of me being at that band practice. And that honestly felt like hell on earth to me. Yeah. You know, I used to miss Star Trek every week because I had to go to band practice. And then the other thing was that would be on at 8:10 on a Wednesday night on BBC One. And then at 9:00 on BBC Two, when it finished and the news would be on BBC One, you'd then flip into having MASH, which I also loved, 9 to 9:30. So I would get home from band practice halfway through MASH every week, having missed Star Trek. And that really felt like some kind of prison sentence to me, if that makes sense.
Well, people don't understand today that in those days, we did not know, and I go back to my childhood, which would have been the late 50s, very early 60s, up to the mid 60s. The idea of having home video was a dream.
Yeah.
I mean,
amazing.
You would kind of fantasize about it. Yeah. The reality was, if you didn't, you know, they would do 39 episodes of a TV show, and then a certain number of them would be rerun. Not everything. Certain number would be run in the summer, and that was your only chance to see these shows ever.
Absolutely right, mate. Absolutely
ever.
Right.
And so it was just like my favorite show. It's gone. It's gone. But I do have to say, I don't know if we've ever talked about this, but I've just, I've got to tell you that my father, did I tell you about him? My father was a guy into two things, sports and music.
Oh, wow.
And
We've not had this conversation before, mate.
Okay, well, my father, who was, as you know, was in the Pacific.
Yes, I do know.
In World War II, he went to a small college near Des Moines on a combination sports and music scholarship, which is very unusual. I mean, and particularly here, I don't know how it is in other countries.
I've never heard anybody having a combination.
You do music or you do sports,
right
and you know that is not. There's no crossover there. So he went on and he was in the band and chorus and played football and played basketball and baseball, and that was his scholarship. So when I grew up, I never was into sports. I've never liked to follow sports. I did like to play sports, and that was the only time my father and I were able to bond on that part of his interest, because I did, when I was in junior high and high school, I did participate in sports, but I never wanted to watch anybody else play. I mean, I wanted to play.
Of course.
Why do I want to watch, it's to me, it's like, it just was ridiculous. And so, but that was the same split between me growing up with him, that I would motivate toward the music because it was the arts and I was interested. And so he was a high school music teacher for a long time. And then when he went into and worked in industry to bring some real money in, because I think they were getting something like $1,500 a year to teach. I mean, that's what it was. And yes, $1,500 was worth more then, but it was still $1,500. I mean, it was terrible. And so he broke off from teaching. He was a brilliant teacher, but he was the director of a male chorus here. And I got drawn into all of the, I wasn't in the male chorus because I was too young, but they did a big show every year, and the kids would be in, and I'm sure he only put the kids in so that I could be in it. And then eventually came the point where I should have joined his organization, but instead I had my rock and roll band. But it was music, and he could relate to that it was music. So it fascinates me that you had the same thing, a father with that split between these two, because they're kind of contradictory.
I know it's so interesting, and I'm fortunate. My dad is still with us to this day. He's in his very late 80s now, but he's always had that. He's my dad is very statistically driven. So he's one of these sports fans who has a wealth of knowledge about sporting stats, and every day of his life he's looking up the latest sporting stats, and he's not just into UK sport. So he's a massive fan of rugby, football and cricket, but he is also a huge fan of baseball and American football and athletics as well, so he's into all of that. So I mean, he's read all of the books about the romance and the mythology of basketball. So the Boys of Summer, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. One of the proudest moments of my life was when my brother and I in the early 2000s got to take Dad to Yankee Stadium to see a baseball game, and sit on the bleachers and have our hot dogs and all that kind of stuff. It was amazing. But he's got almost that kind of sensibility is how he approaches art and music as well. So he's very, very interested in somebody's oeuvre and what they've written and what they've done. And interestingly, my dad's not really into rock and roll at all. He's into every other kind of music apart from that, and for him rock and roll. So the fascinating thing about talking to the old man is he's you could put Elvis Presley on and he'd go, what the fuck is that racket, right? Yeah. Or you could put Outkast on or Jay-Z and he'd go, what the fuck is that racket? And to my dad's ear, he can't hear the difference between the two of those. which is just to him, it's just a noise, and it doesn't matter if it's classic rock and roll or whether it's hip hop. It's the same noise to him, which I find fascinating. But he's tremendously sophisticated in his music taste outside of that very large area. Outside of that, though, if it comes to jazz, swing, classical music, brass band music, he knows everything about it. It's amazing.
Well, I think it's interesting that the sports art combination that your father has and that my father had gave them a place to go when they couldn't be athletes anymore.
Absolutely right.
Because you can continue to be a musician the entire rest of your life.
Absolutely right.
And I think that had a lot to do with it. But I used to tell my father, I'd see him watching stuff. I'd say, you'd watch Venezuelan log rolling. He would look at anything if it was considered a sport. Yeah. And I just didn't get it. Now, when we had we had the top team in my high school in the state, which is a big deal if you're the top one in the state, to go to state championships, I was into that because I knew everybody on the team. But I always knew that at the University of Iowa, there was nobody from Iowa on the University of Iowa team. They went here, they went there, and they got this guy, and I couldn't transfer that. I can't get excited about a town's about a city's hired sports team. I don't see how that we won. No, we didn't. You didn't win anything. You had a beer and a hot dog, and and then went. I don't know. It never worked for me. But if I could do it myself, it's like I probably have been to in my life post dating my wife. I probably have been to maybe 3 dances, and I've played probably 500 dances. I would never ever go listen to other bands. I mean, national bands, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, local combos, screw them. They're the competition. I'll go to my gig.
Yeah,
and I have that same attitude about writing.
I know you do. I absolutely know you do. That's something we've talked about quite a bit. Actually, to flip back down to writing, because as with every conversation we ever have, mate, there are so many avenues we could go off here and fill in hours of recording time talking about. I just want to arc back to something that you and I talked about off camera. By the way, as you'll have heard what Max is famous for writing in my intro to this show. What I will also do in the show notes for this episode is attach some of the previous interviews that Max and I've done for my day job, presenting Forbidden Planet TV, where we get talking in detail about some of Max's work, particularly the stuff that he and I have worked together on, which is the Mickey Spillane's Mike Hammer books. And the whole history of that is laid out in one of those interviews. And it's very interesting. If you've not watched it before and you're interested in this conversation, I would urge you to listen to it. But something I wanted to ask you about is something you mentioned before, which is, so one of my classic descriptions, if I've ever got to introduce Max at a panel, and when I say classic descriptions, it's a classic in my mind. Not society hasn't bought into it as a classic, but it's something that I believe is. I will always introduce Max as the three biggest names in noir fiction: Max Allan Collins. How did you end up using that name as your writing name, Max?
Well, we were talking about my father, and I'm Max Allan Collins Jr.
Yeah.
My father was obviously Max Allan Collins Sr. He was Max Collins. He was very well known in this community, having been a teacher and he was the personnel director at the major company here in town. And so he was Max, and I went by my middle name, Allan.
Yeah.
And to this day, a lot of my friends call me Al.
Ah, interesting.
And so when I sent my first book in, it was by Allan Collins. All right. And then when I got the book in the mail, the byline was Max Collins, which was the name I signed on the contract, right? Yeah. Max Allan Collins. And when I had very little contact with editors at that point.
Yeah.
And when I actually called my agent and said, "Why did they put Max on?" And he said, I'll find out. He said, "Well," and he came back and said, "Well, they thought it sounded more like a mystery writer."
Yeah.
So suddenly I've got my first book with my father's name on it, not my name.
Yeah.
Making it even more of a problem, there was a mystery writer named Michael Collins.
Yeah.
I mean, Michael Collins being a name we all know.
Of course.
But it was a pseudonym for a guy named Dennis Lenz.
Okay, right. I'm aware of his work.
And he came to me, and I got to know him a little bit. And at a certain point, he came to me and said, "You should change your name." And I said, "Why is that?" And he said, "Because, I'm Michael Collins. And so I've got that. And I said, "Oh, okay, then. I tell you what, I'll start writing as Dennis Lenz." That'll be my pseudonym. And then he never said anything about it again. But it still careened into a problem because I wrote a quarry novel called The Slasher. And about the same time he wrote in his series, which is I think about a character named Dan Fortune, a book called The Slasher. And then there were bibliographies, libraries had lists of books and everything, they go M. Collins. So my book and his book kept getting confused. And so I thought, well, maybe I better start putting the middle name in.
Yeah.
So that at least it goes M.A. Collins instead of M. Right. Collins.
Yeah.
So I started using the middle name. And then it began being misspelled because, they don't get Edgar Allan Poe spelling right, so they're not going to get my spelling right, correct? Everybody uses E-N because they tend to do whatever Allan they know in their life, that's the
version they use.
So I've seen A-L-A-A-N. I've even seen A-L-E-N with one L. So, but then I became Max Allan Collins. And I do think it has a nice ring to it. and what Don Westlick approved of it. That was his vote for what my byline should be, was Max Allan Collins. Because he told me, he said, Allan Collins is just another name in the phone book. But Max Allan Collins sounds like
and it does work for you, mate. It's very, very distinctive.
Well, and then people started calling me Max. And then, so now about probably 75% of the people call me Max. And only people I went to high school with or whatever. And some of them come up and say, I don't know what to call you.
Yeah.
I just say, not late for lunch. Not late for lunch.
Right on. It is very interesting how that works, right? Because I would say about 75% of the people that I know call me by my surname, and that's it, just like by my surname, and that's followed me around my whole life. There must be just something about the cadence of my surname that people like, yeah. And
does anybody ever call you Andy?
Nobody's ever called me Andy, with one or two exceptions, primarily because I don't like that version of my name. So I never. It always felt kind of soft and babyish to me. I know there are a lot of Andys in the world who aren't like that at all. Who are, but it was just not for me. So I've never had, people either call me Andrew or Sumner, and I guess it's about a 25-75% split. People will call me
out. My wife calls me out, and
that's brilliant.
So there is sometimes a confusion, because when she's if you were to call her on the phone, she'd probably refer to me. She wouldn't be thinking that, well, he knows him as Max.
Yeah.
But I do have that. I have the situation of, like, when we do Christmas cards.
Yeah.
She gives them to me so that I can write Max on the ones that know me as Max, and I can write Al on the ones that know me as Al. And my agent always calls me Alan, because he's British and he's very formal.
Yeah.
And so he's always Alan, and he always refers to me as Alan when he deals with people in business who don't know what the fuck he's talking about.
That is brilliant, mate. Hey, Max.
It's a mess, Andrew.
I love it. I absolutely love it. We are racing towards the end of this conversation. So I just want to arc back to something we were talking about before. A movie we both love, and I've talked about at length, off camera, which is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Now, interestingly enough, I recorded another episode of the show recently with Garth Ennis, the creator of Preacher and The Boys, and he is also a fellow lover of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And as I mentioned it in that episode, so is a great bloke I know who works in the movie licensing industry, a good friend of mine called Chris Lucero, who is kind of Burbank born and raised, and that movie had a whole ton of resonance for him. But what I wanted to mention was Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was a specific way in to a band that I was aware of, but had literally never heard anything they recorded. And was a huge hole in my musical knowledge, bigger than that, in fact. And something you helped me research quite a bit, and I learned quite a lot talking to you about them. And it was Paul Revere and the Raiders.
Oh, Paul Revere! I thought you were going to say Vanilla Fudge.
Yeah, because Paul Revere, even though I was always aware of them, I had Paul Revere and the Raiders, I guess, in the same bracket as my mind as the Batman '66 show. And while I love Batman '66, I just thought they were essentially some kind of clown act band, and they didn't really make much of a dent in the UK charts. So it wasn't like I'd heard them when I was a little kid in the 60s. I don't think they had any hits in the UK. I'd have to double check that. So I'd always been aware of who they are. They wore the crazy, like, revolutionary get-ups, but that was it. And one of the things that I took away from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and one of the things you helped me learn more about, was how good Paul Revere and the Raiders actually are.
Yeah, they were a bar band, and the I don't know at what point they adopted the get-up, the Revolutionary War get-up. I mean, obviously that was a response to the British invasion.
Of course, yeah.
That was the gimmick, and it was a time where you did have to have a gimmick because there were so many bands. Andrew, when I had my band in high school in the 60s, there was a point where I live in a town of. We still are a town, not quite 30,000. It was probably 23,000 people. Okay. We had 38 rock and roll bands in this town.
Wow.
38. And none of us were old enough to play bars. So we're all chasing the same prom gigs, the same homecoming gigs, and the same house party gigs. And so getting a gig was, I mean, if you played in a year 5 times, it was amazing. And so you needed something to stand apart. And that's one of the things they did. And they were funny. They knew, and they were sending it up. They were never like, well, we're revolutionary. No, it was all crazy. And they did steps.
Yeah.
But they were funny. It was but they played really strong rock. They did Louie first.
Oh yeah, just it great garage rock. Yeah,
and they were all Washington State bands.
Yeah,
and playing a lot of bars, and playing a lot of R&B, stuff. And so they were really, really good. They got slicker because what happened to so many of the bands was they once they got popular, they sent them out on the road on just incredible, they do 251 nighters in a year. And so they couldn't work in the studio. So that's where the Wrecking Crew came in.
Yeah, right.
And so they would only come in and do vocals. I mean, the Association were the same way. I saw the Associate. They were an incredible band, and they still aren't in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And they had amazing hits, and they could perform them beautifully. But after the first, I think, 2 albums, it was all recorded by studio musicians except for the vocals. And then at a certain point, when the band got less popular, they went back. They
started doing their own stuff again.
Stuff. But that's why there's all that sameness. And those guys were great. The Wrecking Crew was great.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of stories about things like, going in to record. I forget the woman's name, but this woman bass player who was phenomenal, who they'd go in, and Sonny Bono would come in with the beat goes on, and he's like, well, what kind of bass part should we have? And she goes, bum, 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 bum. And that's the whole fucking song.
Yeah, right.
Okay? Or to go into that studio and we got to get out of this place and come up with that bass part.
Yeah.
Which is, again, pretty much the whole song. And, so you can't take away from those studio musicians. But on the other hand, they slicked it up. And that's why I have a real affinity for the one-hit wonder kinds of bands. I love Question Mark and the Mysterians.
Oh, for sure.
Who are just barely competent.
Yeah, no, it's so
But then so are we. Were we barely competent.
But the thing is, I guess the thing about their one hit is such an unusual and distinctive piece of music that it doesn't sound like anything else, right? That's the beauty of a lot of those one hit wonders. They deliver something.
John Lennon said that 96 Tears was the greatest rock and roll song of all time. Now I don't know what he'd been smoking or imbibing at the time, but there's something to that. They actually had about 5 hits, but they didn't have anything to compare to 96 Tears.
Oh, yeah. Who was that female bass player? Was it Carol Kay?
Yeah. She's
Carol
great.
Kay. Yeah, she was amazing. Yeah, she was amazing. She's I think she's still alive, actually, Carol.
I think so. Well, they were fantastic. The Wrecking Crew.
Oh, mate, that is again another supremely hard degree, and I think. Given the fact that is such a rich topic of conversation, why don't we park this right now? And why don't you come back and join me on another episode? And we'll get much more into the music conversation I was always intending us to have. And we talked about so much other stuff, as we always do, that we never even got there and opened the door on it.
Well, I'll try to work in. I am a member of the Rock and Roll Iowa.
Yeah, right on.
2-time member.
Yeah, deservedly so, mate.
And don't think that when I do perform, and I haven't because of COVID for a year, but when I perform with my current band, who are also got into the, rode my coattails into the Iowa Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. When I'm introducing the band and saying that everybody's in the Iowa Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, don't think I don't remind everybody that I'm in twice. And that's for the benefit of the other guys in the band. So that
And also, mate, just to close out on, you, of course, had your famous San Diego Comic-Con band as well, Seduction of the Innocent. And Seduction of the Innocent was you and Billy Mummy and
Miguel Ferrer.
Yeah, Miguel Ferrer, the great Miguel Ferrer,
who I love, and then also Chris Christensen, who's a drummer and kind of fill-in man, and then the great Steve Lealoha, who's wonderful.
Wonderful. Hey, mate, did you ever see the inks he did on? He did spectacular inks on Ditko once. I think it was for a project. It's called Dark Dimension or something. I think where it was relatively late in Ditko's career, and it was a project for Jim Shooter, and here's the combination of Steve and Steve Ditko. It's really quite magical.
Well, I'm going to tell you to go searching for something, and anybody who's still listening to this, Seduction of the Innocent.
Yeah.
The Truth Hurts. The Truth Hurts on YouTube.
Okay.
Look for that, because that's the only music video we made for our album. And watch very carefully, and you'll see Brandon Lee in the background.
Oh, fantastic. I will find that, and I will stick the link in the show notes for this episode, mate. That is wonderful. Brilliant. On that most supreme of hard degrees, I think that's where we'll part company for today, mate. It's been right. Max, it's always such a pleasure chatting with you. I could do it for hours. I could go on and record another 2 hours of this easily. Well,
I'll tell you as my parting shot that, as you can imagine, since I've been at this a while, I've been at a number of conventions and had a number of people interview me.
Yeah.
And nobody compares to you, Andrew.
Oh, you are very kind, mate. You're very kind. Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, whether the truth is we'll be on the road with some great stuff in the future, and we'll get to do it again.
Absolutely.
And just
Comic-Con again. I want to go back.
And I know that we're working together on some great plans for the Mike Hammer 75th anniversary for next year, 2002. And we will no doubt be back again talking about that on the road up to those publications. But if you're a Mike Hammer fan, and Max and myself, of course, are the ultimate Mike Hammer fans, and you don't get a bigger Mike Hammer fan than Max Allan Collins, you're going to really enjoy what Max is cooking up. It's going to be something to really look forward to.
Yes, and can we mention Masquerade for Murder is still out there?
Yeah.
Is it coming out in paper pretty soon?
I think it's going to stick in hardback for a while, but it's definitely available everywhere in that beautiful hardback edition.
And then we have a book coming out that has been previously published, but has the previously censored version of the ending.
Yeah, so, I mean, I can't wait for that actually, and that's coming out actually in a really nice trade paperback edition. I actually I think it's coming out. I'm just trying to buy a bit of time here while I look at the details of when it's actually published. But it's very soon. It's coming out in about 2 months' time, and that's out there. That's coming soon. Masquerade for Murder is available now, and so it's what is it? What is it?
Kiss Her Goodbye.
Yeah, Kiss Her Goodbye. That's it.
Kiss Her Goodbye.
Mate. Yeah, I am trying to find the note. Do you know what? I've got it. I just found it then as I was scrolling down. Let me go back. I might cut a bit of the shilly-shallying out. Here we go. Right. I will do. Yeah, so that's absolutely right, Max. We've got Mickey Spillane and Max Allan Collins, Kiss Her Goodbye, coming out in paperback from Titan Books on the 6th of April 2021 in a really lovely trade paperback edition with, as you just mentioned, Max, your previously censored ending.
Yes, my previous editor, who was a good editor, but insisted that I do the ending over because he felt it was too much like the ending of one of the classic Mike Hammers from the early 50s, and I have now restored it to what I had in mind.
Yeah, and it's a great read actually, and Masquerade for Murder, which is I'll spur your blushes by saying has been very well reviewed, and continues to get really great reviews. I've got a great one in the Daily Mail in the UK the other day, and Masquerade for Murder is out now. I'll put the links again in the show notes. If you're a Mike Hammer fan and you haven't sampled a Mike Hammer book recently, or you haven't sampled one of Mickey and Max's books, that's a great one to check out. And I'm not just saying that because I was the editor. It's a fantastic book. Very Max is quite rightly very proud of it, and so am I.
Thanks for having me today.
Hey, mate, it's always great to see you, man. Always great to see you, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon, Max.
Thank you, Andrew.
Take care, brother. All the best. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Hard Agree. This episode was edited by John Horsley and Kenrick Regan, and our theme music, Golden, was written and performed for this show by Liverpool's finest band, DENIO. Hard Agree is a production of the Spoilerverse and myself, Andrew Sumner.